Joe Rogan being canceled from Spotify, Whoopi being canceled from The View. What do Jews think about cancel culture today on Face to Face? And the video isn't working. That's fantastic. I moved everything. Wait, I have to find the opening video. Now it's telling me I have to find the opening video. Vamp while I look for the opening video, Rabbi.
Why do we need the opening video? We've started.
We don't need the opening video? I feel like we need the opening video. Wait, I'm finding the opening video. It's too good to not have the opening video.
It has been canceled. Okay? Your opening video.
Oh, I know why. Canceled. I know why, because it didn't download. That's okay. That's all right. All right. I told you all it would be worth.
So excited.
Oh my God. Sorry about that. I signed out of my iCloud account earlier today and it hadn't downloaded everything again. Hey.
Hey, how are you, Rabbi David?
I'm good. How you doing? So you spoke last Shabbos about the Whoopi Goldberg thing.
Yeah.
Now, she hasn't been canceled. She's been put on leave. In fact, I don't know when she's coming back. There was an interesting take. Someone wrote to...
I'm going to jump in. I'm going to be obnoxious and say, I don't think that that is a reflection of cancel culture.
Fair enough. So
what we want, what is cancel culture?
Right. First. All right. So what we want to talk about today is, I guess, what would we consider cancel culture? And is this something new? Is it something that's existed in Judaism? And how have we dealt with it? So we don't have a lot of examples. I was searching through the Tanakh, and we don't have a lot of examples that I could find of cancel culture. Were you able to find any, or where do you want to start today? How do we begin this conversation?
I think we should start with, I'm a big believer in let's define our terms first, okay. And then we can find whatever examples we are. So for me, I think cancel culture is the unwillingness to hear contrary opinions. We could call it censorship, where those ideas and really ideas that are deemed outside of the mainstream are canceled in that they're not allowed to be a part of it. And then I think that and this is where I'm going to go next, where I think it's the weaponizing of dissent that in some cases ends up being death, that there are people who are being canceled, and not just in that they're being told that they can't speak, but that their opinions are viewed as so dangerous that it gives license to others to do harm. Okay, so you asked the question. So let's just say, anything you want to add to that? In your own?
No. Let's stick with that for now.
Okay, so
let's keep it simple.
So I think that that's a reasonable definition. And for me, you asked about the Bible. So I'm going to bring up a few ideas or a few places within Jewish tradition. And the first one I'm going to bring up is the story of Korach. Okay? Korach, if we remember, this is in Exodus, I forget whatever chapter it is, you can look it up, where Korach and his band of mighty men decide that they are going to challenge the leadership of Moses and Aaron and Miriam, and they say, we want to be a part of it. Why do you alone get to have the leadership? They are, in my estimation, they are in effect trying to democratize Judaism. Right? So,
which, by the way, we should say, go team.
That's right? My point. Okay?
Right.
And it's going to be my point throughout, is that what ends up happening to them? They end up getting killed. They get canceled. Right? They literally, there we go. Um, their ideas get rejected. Okay?
Yeah.
They rise up. Now, we can talk about the how they went about it. Okay, and the rabbis have great trouble with um, the both the content and the context.
They blame it on in fact, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but they blame it on otherness,
Right,
which is actually really interesting to me. And I'd love to, when we get to rabbinic stuff, I want to talk a little bit about how cancel culture is so much about othering people.
correct.
They say that Korach, don't they say that Korach was part of the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, the Egyptians that came out, of
Right,
Egypt. It wasn't us, wasn't the Jews. We don't do that kind of
right. Well,
stuff.
that I think they're just rejected. That's part of the othering,
Right.
the rejection. So I think that we have an example here. I like whenever Korah comes around in the calendar, and I'm in Torah study with our regulars. Um, we love Korah,
Yeah.
right? As Reformed Jews, right? As Jews who believe in a non-hierarchical Judaism, we say go Korah,
Right.
right? And yet that idea gets rejected, gets canceled by whoever was in power at the time. Right?
And if I could add that in the moment, Korach was quite literally, as you said, canceled, and yet, and his idea was canceled in the moment, and yet we read about him every single year, right? He gets his
Right.
own parsha. So in some ways, we've resurrected the at least the value in remembering stories that we were told to forget, or ideas that we were told to forget.
Rabbi David, I think that is going to be the message for today. Right? As we look at the examples that I want to bring to the table of individuals within Judaism who have been quote unquote canceled, right?
Okay.
That I think that some of the great Jewish ideas have come from those individuals.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, all right, you brought up the rabbinic tradition. I presume you are going to be talking. You want to talk about Elisha ben Avuya.
I
All right,
love Elisha Ben Abuya.
go ahead.
When I read As a Driven Leaf, it
Uh
changed
huh.
my life
Yep.
because, for those of you who don't know, was it Milton Steinberg?
Milton Steinberg.
Yeah, As a Driven Leaf. For me, this is a little off on a tangent, but for me, what made that book so important, so powerful, is it took these characters that I had learned about, and it brought them to life. They had emotion. They had, they were real. They weren't just characters in an ancient story. Elisha ben Abuya felt and struggled, and all the other people around him. And so before, when I was saying I want to talk about Acher, throughout rabbinic literature, Elisha ben Abuya is called Acher. He's called
Okay, and
the
what
other,
acher means other.
other,
Okay,
right?
he
The
is
outsider.
other.
Yeah, yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So just tell a little bit more. Why is he outside of the norm? Why does he get canceled?
Yeah, so Elisha ben Abuya he in the most beautiful sense, he is a Yisrael. He is a wrestler. He struggles with everything. And Elisha, he was a scholar, he was a brilliant sage, but he rejected religious life. And in turn, most people rejected him. Rabbi Meir still studied from him. And the Talmud, in fact, asks, like, what could Rabbi Meir possibly have learned from Elisha ben Abuya? And then there's a whole
Which
discussion
I
that
think
follows about.
that question is a canceling question
Yeah.
because it
Yes.
suggests, all right, that's that of course there isn't something that this person's ideas are different from the mainstream, and therefore there's
Not worth.
nothing
Yeah.
that one can learn from this individual.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. There's in this same discussion, there's a question about who does God, so they're debating back and forth about why, if there's any value in Rabbi Meir, and one of the proofs that they bring is, well, who does God quote when God's trying to make a point? Which is a really interesting question about divine censorship, right? If God doesn't quote Elisha ben Abuya, does that mean that God is actually playing that same game of he's outside of the norm? He's not worth listening to.
And I don't think you have to make that leap, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
all right, so we've got Korach in the biblical time period. We've got Elisha ben Abuya in the rabbinic period, and if you're going to look it up in Talmud, it's Chagiga.
Yep. 15.
Chagiga 15b.
Yep.
Right? I want to go. I'm actually going to go to the Middle Ages. Okay?
Yep.
And all right, who is the greatest of the rabbinic sages of the Middle Ages?
It's got to be my man. Help me, Rambam. Help me, Rambam. Help me, Maimonides.
Okay.
Sorry.
Maimonides or Rambam, right? Who, in preparing for this, I really needed to think about it, because Rambam is not somebody we would see as being canceled.
Or
right?
Acher, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because he is, at this point, venerated. Right? There's supposedly on his epitaph, or somebody said, from Moshe, meaning Moses in the Bible, to Moshe,
Moshe ad Moshe. Yeah.
There is no other Moses. Right. Okay, like they make a direct link between Moses of the Bible and Moses Maimonides, and yet, okay, so many of Maimonides' ideas were rejected when he was living. Okay, so he, interestingly, allowed Jews to apostatize, to convert to Islam under pressure. Right? Now, remember, you're supposed to, you're supposed to allow yourself to die, right, rather than worship other gods or do whatever. All right, but he's living in a time when Muslims took over, right, around when he was 13. They're forcing Jews to convert or die. His family probably converted. His rabbi was tortured to death for practicing Judaism in secret. He's arrested with the same charge, ends up being saved by a friend. Okay? And then later in Egypt, a rival accuses him and wants to put him to death for apostasies. And it's only a friendly Muslim judge, who is probably one of his patients, because remember, Maimonides is a physician as well, all right, who rules that Maimonides' conversion was legally invalid because it was coerced anyways. Right? So you've got an idea that seems radical, and there are others in the Jewish community who are canceling him for this. He believed in spiritual rather than physical or bodily resurrection. Right? Again, right? What ends up in what we call the 13 Articles of Faith, which were written by Maimonides. Right? One of them is resurrection.
Right. You have to believe. Yep.
But, right, that resurrection, right, is a spiritual resurrection rather than a bodily one, and that was not accepted. Um, so there are any number of other examples of Rambam um, giving ideas that the remaining or the surrounding Jewish community didn't accept. In fact, the 13 articles of faith themselves were, there was a whole lot of controversy for generations. Right? Those 13 articles of faith don't come back into Judaism until 100 or so years after his death. And
You know,
now they are literally said,
right.
right, in
Every
Orthodox,
morning.
they're said every day,
Yeah.
right, as if this is it.
Right.
That wasn't the case.
I have to wonder if there's not long after my mind was around like what 12th century, I think.
Yeah,
So around the 15th century, we started seeing haskamot, which are when rabbis would sort of put their stamp of approval on certain books. This book is okay, but this book isn't okay, or this teacher's okay, this teacher isn't okay. I wonder if some of that grew out of Rambam being such an influential and yet for other rabbis of that time, not scary, but troubling figure. It also makes me wonder, of all the examples we've talked about so far, they're canceled in their time and then they find their way back sometimes to tremendous prominence. So how short-sighted is it of us to cancel someone or an idea? I mean, we're not able to appreciate that, okay, it doesn't resonate with me today. Okay, I don't like it. It's uncomfortable. And yet, it's an idea that is part of the larger conversation and our larger vocabulary around things, theology, philosophy, politics, whatever it is. And there needs to be a place for it, maybe.
I think that is there again. There's our lesson for
Yeah.
today. You mentioned the Middle Ages, and I think that I would bring up the idea of cherem.
Mm.
Right? Now, cherem predates the Middle Ages, but cherem, excommunication, was in fact, a way of canceling
Yeah.
somebody. The community agreed, to push that person out of out of the community, out of sight, unable to be included, not in the minyan, not in communal life. That person was economically ostracized, ideas ostracized, and you have people like Spinoza, who was way past his time, way before his time, and his ideas, he gets excommunicated by the community of Amsterdam, I think, Amsterdam, where he's living. But
He was Dutch himself, but I
right.
think, yeah.
But I'm gonna even give you, all right. Let's go to the modern period.
Wait,
Right?
before you do that, I just want to mention that we still have cherem today. I
We
hear
do.
about cherem being used with, not so much with cancel culture, but with husbands who won't offer their wives a get in the traditional community. Sometimes the community will put that person in cherem, say they can't daven here, they can't do business here, things like
Right.
that.
And that's certainly much more um, a a product of the Orthodox community, where that what the rabbi says goes,
Right.
and they have that harem means something. Let me give you this the modern example, which I didn't know about until just preparing for this. Right? Mordecai Kaplan, okay,
Mm.
Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan, right, who was the originator of Reconstructionist Judaism, himself an Orthodox rabbi who spent his career at Jewish Theological Seminary, the conservative seminary, before he ended up moving away and into what he created, the Reconstructionist movement. Now, listen to this. This is unreal. Right?
Bring it.
In June 12th, 1945. Okay, think about that date. Okay, literally a month after Nazi Germany gets defeated. Okay, June 12th, 1945, a group of rabbis from Agudat Harabanim, right, Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox group in New York City, gather at, I forget what the name of the hotel was, but one of the largest hotels in New York, okay, and burned his siddur, okay, put him into cherem, okay, into excommunication, because they didn't like the content of his siddur.
By the way, we should probably mention he had Orthodox smicha, if I'm not mistaken.
I said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's I'm sorry. I missed that.
Yeah. And that's where they feel like they can put him into cherem, right? Like, this is after Nazi Germany, where books are being burned, right? Like, that a Jewish group, right, would use this as the tool, right, to say, we don't accept your ideas, right, and therefore, and it was supposed to be a publicity stunt. It got a lot of publicity. In fact, Kaplan says that was the hardest part of this. He didn't really care what they thought or didn't think, but that the media saw this as a stunt, and of course took it on. What's interesting, though, is because he's outside of the Orthodox community, and he was living in a post-World War II world, America, right, which is much more open. Okay, it really didn't mean much,
right?
But I think it's an instructive example, modern example of a cancel culture. Right? This community said, we don't believe in what you are writing, and therefore we are going to cancel it. And then, as you keep pointing out, right, the message here is, right, now we look at Mordecai Kaplan and we say he is one of the great thinkers of Judaism. Forget American Judaism, but Judaism in the 20th century.
And Baruch Spinoza and Rambam, Maimonides, and and. Can I? I've been waiting all week to ask you this question.
Bring it on, my friend.
Okay. So this isn't about a person, a modern person being canceled. This is about an idea, or more specifically, even a text. This is something that has bothered me for decades. On Yom Kippur afternoon, the Torah reading designated for that day is from the book of Leviticus. And it talks about, I don't want to get into how you can parse it, but fundamentally on a pshat basic level, it talks about homosexual relationships. Not even relationships, really, but homosexual sex. Okay. It's a very uncomfortable text. I believe the entire Reform movement, and I think much of the conservative movement, and probably much of the Reconstruction movement, canceled it. They said, we're not going to read this. In fact, I don't even know if it's in the Machzor for Yom Kippur. We canceled it. And that bothers me, because that is cancel culture. This, just because something's uncomfortable doesn't mean we should ignore it or pretend like it doesn't exist. It means Jon Stewart on his podcast last week was saying that he he believes strongly that if something's uncomfortable, that means engage with it. Engage, struggle with it. Don't ignore it. So what say you, my fellow rabbinic colleague? Do you cancel Leviticus chapter 18 or 19 or whichever one it is?
So the answer is yes and no. Okay, because I can talk out of both sides of my mouth.
Okay.
Right. I cancel it on Yom Kippur because I think that there are more important texts, right? More important texts for us to look at. I don't cancel it in saying that I never read it, right? I think we do have to engage with it. I think we do have to struggle with what we do with these uncomfortable texts in our tradition, right?
And I would fight back. I would push back. Sorry, that I don't disagree with you. Of course, it's not the most important text. Although, then again, who am I to decide what's important, what isn't? But
Rambam managed to figure.
Yeah, he did. That's true. He did.
He nailed it down to 13.
You're absolutely right.
People roiled against it, and people said,
"You're right.
All right, you can't. What? All of the other commandments aren't so important. You know, you pick these 13."
I would argue that at a moment when we have the most people listening, we go to easy texts. We go to comfy places. When what we should be doing is highlighting.
Is a comfortable text?
No, fair enough. Fair enough. You're right. You're right. You're right. That was a bad word. You're right. Although I think, no, you know what? No, I'm pushing back. The Akedah is not a comfortable text. We all agree it was terrible. Like, there's no one who would say, oh yeah, I'm glad he tried to kill his son. No one would say that. But this text about gay marriage or gay relationships, there is genuine debate about how we understand this and the role that this text should play in Judaism. And I would argue that at a time when we have the most people paying attention, that's precisely what we should be reading.
Yeah, I get that. I do. I'm not.
That was a short argument. That was.
Did we argue about that?
We really didn't.
I think yes, and
yeah.
I think you can. We make decisions. We only have a certain number. I think there have been times where I have spoken about that, even if we're not reading it, and I say, "Hey, we don't read it, but we need to deal with it." I think that we make choices. Choices, and this is where the whole cancel culture I struggle a little with, because I start to ask the questions and I don't have the answers. So I'm interested in your thought. Are there things that we should cancel? Are there ideas that are so reprehensible, right? And who gets to make the decision, right? Because for the Agudat Harabanim, right, the idea of Kaplan's God as being a non-corporeal being, as being a spirit found in nature rather than a personal God, is so reprehensible that they want to cancel that because they see it as so far. Is that acceptable? Is that not acceptable? Is there, and I just don't have the answer. I don't know. This is, I think, very similar to in the United States, we allow for freedom of speech, which includes American Nazis who want to protest and shout horrible things.
Right.
And all I want to do is shut them down.
Right. The Holocaust is that's sort of an obvious example of this, but I'll give you, I just read, was it yesterday or the day before in the Times, I think, that there's a group of Orthodox Jews in New York that just filed a lawsuit against the city or the state about the vaccine mandate. They're saying, it's against our religious principles. And they had two specific reasons, which were, if you ask me, cockamamie reasons. But I find myself, when it comes to that, when I hear people lying about vaccines, when I hear people lying about, I don't want to say truth because that's so dangerous, but I want to shut that down. And it seems that within Judaism, we have a long history of doing that. And yet the lesson is maybe that isn't the right way to go. Maybe listen.
Can I'm looking at our time, and
I know.
Want to acknowledge. I want to end with a poem. Okay? A poem that was suggested to me by my friend and colleague, Rabbi Jeff Salkin. But I don't want to. If there's another thought, if you've got it.
No, I'm good. Look, none of these conversations are meant to give any definitive answers. It's meant to spark people to think. So, if you're watching and you're leaving here not knowing any more than you showed up, that's okay. But hopefully you at least have some more questions to ask. So, all right, take it away.
A poem by called "Outwitted" by Edwin Markham. Okay? Here's the poem. Okay? He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in.
Wow.
I think that we so often draw the circles around people that shut people out or shut ideas out. And that, as you rightly said a couple of times today, I think that we're not always going to get it right. Okay? There are going to be things that we are going to hear that are reprehensible. Okay? But on balance, okay, that if we approach people and ideas with love and with wit, then we draw circles that bring people in and ideas in, and that's going to be the better choice.
And I would only add to that drawing, it's easy and natural to draw those circles around people with whom we agree. It's so much harder when what someone is saying feels ugly or hurtful or painful or wrong. And maybe one of the lessons is alachat kama v'kama, even more so for those people. You know what? Can I make a friendly amendment to that poem? Draw a circle and invite them in.
Right.
Instead of bring them in.
Yeah, that's calling people out versus, calling people in.
Yeah.
Right? Can we bring them into dialogue? Right? We may not change their mind, but we ourselves can understand where they're coming from and appreciate that.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is a good one. I really enjoyed talking about this because it's something I think we're all struggling with. So, so we'll be back in a couple weeks. Anything exciting this weekend at services that people can look forward to? Have you decided what you're speaking about, or?
I have not decided what I'm speaking about. I won't be here on Friday. I'm doing a program with Base Miami.
That's great.
I get to go out of the community, but Cantor will be here. So
that's very nice. Good. Well, I hope you all will join us. tsnd.tv is where you can find all of our live streams. Have an amazing rest of the day, everyone. See you later.